And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
Oh, happy day. It is Saturday. Welcome to Cover One, the draft podcast. I'm Russell Brown, with me, CP Christian Page. My man, happy Saturday to you. How you doing?
Man, we made it. I'm so excited to have a list of college football games that actually have a little more meaning than maybe the last week or so, but still glad we have college football today and then NFL football tomorrow.
Oh, it is so. I mean, I'm a little bummed up here in Big Ten country just simply because I go to my closet, I look at my green Michigan State hoodie, I got my jersey there, and I'm like, man, I can't even put this on. I do have a Spartan hoodie on, but I'm like, man, they're not playing today. It kind of sucks in that regard, but a ton of college games today with Syracuse, North Carolina, which kicks off in about 50 minutes or so. You've got Louisiana against Iowa State. You can watch a little Brock Purdy if you're into that thing, and you can find an article on him over at cover1.net. You've got Notre Dame and Duke, Georgia Tech and Florida State. We're going to get into a couple of games, but the big game tonight is Clemson Wake Forest. That's on ABC at 7:30. So that's probably going to be the one that's getting all the pub later tonight on Twitter, which of course you guys can find us on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft and at _Christian Page. So be sure to smash the follow button. But CP, let's get into it. College football Saturday, we've got a lot to talk about as far as some games that we are interested in seeing. I know you've got a game circled on the map that you cannot wait to watch. Which game is that? What are some players that we should be looking at for those games?
Yeah, I think one of the more intriguing ones is the Florida State hosting Georgia Tech. I mean, Marvin Wilson, as we know, very well documented on this podcast, that the defensive tackle for Florida State is one of my favorite players, one of my favorite prospects in this 2021 class. And his athletic profile, and I really love just every time I watch his film, he's always penetrating the pocket, mostly due because he just has those active hands and he has that secondary rush plan, whether it's in the run game or whether it's when he's rushing the passer. So I really would like to see him, really make his mark week one. He's definitely somebody that stood out from ever since I turned the tape on him a year ago. And now I think he's one of the top 10 prospects in this 2021 class. So just if we're talking about prospects in general, I think that's one you definitely have to circle, and that comes on at 3:30 Eastern time on ABC.
I cannot wait to watch that game. And I mean, just to see him against that Georgia Tech offensive line, which is nothing great, but to just see him in the middle there and with his length and his size. I mean, I loved Derek Brown last year, but I think I like Marvin Wilson just a little bit more. Am I wrong for thinking that?
A little hot takey.
I mean, I'm not trying to get the hot takes going this early in the season, but I mean, Marvin Wilson, man, I'm not, screw it. I'm going to say it. I think he, like a little Chris Jones light. I think we could see that type of potential for him if everything goes right down the line here. If he can stay healthy, that's key for Marvin Wilson. But I'm excited to see him today, obviously. Another player, though, for this game, and I think it could be, he has struggled. He's not had a great offensive line, but I think James Blackman for Florida State could maybe be, I don't want to say a sleeper, but a guy that if in the right system with the right coaching staff, I think there's some tools to work with there. Now, I think he struggles a bit under pressure, definitely needs to get more consistent with ball placement, and obviously he needs an offensive line in front of him. But I think with today, he might be able to turn something into, not just today, but have a decent season. Is he a guy that maybe we circle back to in a couple of weeks if everything's going right?
Potentially, man. I feel like James Blackman's been at Florida State for years.
For decades.
I guess he took over for DeAndre Francois when he injured his knee. And Blackman, I guess now it's his final year. But I guess, he's kind of stuck the path. And maybe this is his last year kind of to shine. So he definitely has a lot of the attention. He has the name recognition. And starting over fresh, I guess, with a new coaching system, then we'll see what he's capable of. But this could definitely be a game that kind of gets him on the map of potentially being maybe a day 3 quarterback.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, odds are he is what he is at this point, and that's probably what I always do. I fall in love with one of these ACC quarterbacks and hype them up to be a little bit too much than they need to be.
Trap. Don't do it.
I know. I'm terrible. But the other game that I like is Duke at Notre Dame. I mean, this is how can you not like this game on NBC? I've always enjoyed watching Notre Dame on NBC. Just maybe it's because it's a local thing for me up here, but I've just always enjoyed watching it. And I think Notre Dame is in an interesting spot this year, playing in this ACC schedule, kind of that first time ever for us. And they've got obviously some players to keep tabs on. Ian Book, their quarterback, nothing to really write home about, but people have talked about his potential. But I think for them, it's all on the defensive side of the football. I mean, I'm not going to discredit Liam Eichenberg at offensive tackle. I'm not going to discredit that there. But I think defensively is really where they thrive. And I think it's at linebacker for them. The linebacker, I'm going to butcher the name, but Jeremiah Owusu-Koroma, I think it is. This guy, number 6, he moves pretty well. He's got, some decent size as far as being able to maybe play in that box role. 8.5 sacks last year, an effective blitzer. I like his game. He went sideline to sideline quite a bit when I watched him over the summer. I think he's a potential top 30 type of player, top 35 type of player. So I'm big into that game.
I think this is going to be one of those underrated matchups that as scouts, we go back and watch a handful of times when it becomes that, final evaluation period, maybe in the December and January type period, because I think there's just a lot of underrated talent here. You touched on, the linebackers in the secondary there for Notre Dame. Duke has a defensive lineman. I cannot pronounce his name. Victor is his first name. And then you talked about, Eichenberg on the offensive line, potentially Ian Book. We talked about Blackman being a day 3 quarterback. Book kind of plays with that tough grit type mentality that maybe some teams would covet in the day 3 parts of the draft. So I think this is just kind of a game that, we may watch, of course, now for entertainment purposes, and it may not be this sexy scoring affair type game in week 1. But I think just from an NFL scouting perspective, we may come back to this game a couple times. So don't be surprised. There's a few players that kind of rise from the ashes of this game and actually become, I don't say household names, but enough to actually be draftable prospects when 2021 rolls around.
For sure. Do you have another game that you're looking at? I know, there's a couple of different games on the schedule.
I guess coming back, I'm going out of order here, but with the 12 o'clock noon kickoff on ACC Network, which some of us don't get, we can, put our gripes in the comment box. But Syracuse at North Carolina, and we talked a little bit about Andre Cisco, the safety kind of rover from Syracuse. Just talked about his ball skills, his range, his inconsistent tackling. But just watching this overall matchup between he and how he operates against just the dynamic ability of quarterback Sam Howell for North Carolina. Of course, Sam Howell, he's a true sophomore right now, so not eligible for the 2021 draft, but still seeing Cisco maybe operate against this spread passing system with North Carolina. We know what they're capable of with Dazz Newsome at wide receiver, so that could be a possible matchup there for Cisco. You're talking about man-on-man, but just think, Cisco, he's going to be playing all over the place. He's going to be one of those highlighted players on the broadcast, so there's a lot of expectations coming in for this season. And I think, day 1, he has a chance to kind of, capitalize on some of those expectations against North Carolina.
All valid points. Dazz Newsome's a lot of fun to watch, one of those senior receivers, probably a guy that we'll be talking to in Mobile at the Senior Bowl if everything goes right. But I mean, yeah, this is going to be one of those early games. You obviously go to the defensive side of the ball as well. Chaz Surratt. I don't have the opt-out tracker in front of me, so I'm not exactly sure who in the ACC is all opted out. I know it's his brother, right? Sage Surratt, he's opted out. So for Wake Forest. So I don't think Chaz has opted out, but I mean, at the same time, he might have, if I missed it by now, but he was very, very productive last year. 6.5 sacks. He had over 115 tackles, a couple of interceptions. So at 6'2", 230, this guy kind of fits today's NFL linebacker with length and just overall size and the athletic ability. So keep tabs on him. But I'm with you on Andre Cisco. This guy has some ball skills. He's got the range. He's kind of got that total package for the safety position, and he could very well climb up kind of like Antoine Winfield did last year for Minnesota. I'm not saying that's a pro comparison, but I think his style of play is somewhat similar, and I think he could rise up draft boards in a similar way as well. But the other game for me that I'm watching, obviously I'll be watching all these games that we're talking about, but the other one is the night game, Clemson and Wake Forest. I'm interested to see how Wake Forest responds to just, like I said, Sage Sherrod. He's out for the season with opting out due to COVID-19 and just wants to prep for the NFL draft. But the player that I'm paying attention to the most, obviously Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence, but Amari Rodgers. I've been hyping this guy up for months, and I think this is a guy that, with T. Higgins gone and all of that stuff, Justin Ross done for the year, I think you get a guy with thick lower body. He's going to run through some arm tackles. He's got the breakaway speed. He is coming back from a torn ACL 2 years ago. He played through it last year, and he did it in like record fashion. He tore his ACL, and like 7 months later, he was back on the field. So this is a guy with great balance, good control, good footwork. I think in the slot, this is an ideal position for him. He can be a player that can kind of be that design screen guy. You can design the offense for him. He'll run, quite a few post routes, a lot of vertical routes, and a lot of quick out routes and those types of routes. So I think Clemson will utilize him quite a bit, just simply because it is a veteran guy, first game of the season. You're going to see, I think, a very productive game for him. I don't know if you're going to see like 15 receptions, but it wouldn't surprise me if Amari Rodgers has 7 or 8 receptions and a potential 1 or 2 touchdowns tonight for Clemson. So I'm big on this game, just simply for the offensive firepower that we could see from Clemson early tonight.
Absolutely. I mean, there's quite a few, even with some of the opt-outs and injuries, one highlighting Justin Ross. Hopefully, he can battle back and be good to prepare for next season. Just hoping his neck and back injury is correctable and he can go back to playing football if that's what he desires. But just talking about an overall holistically from an NFL draft perspective, I think Carlos Basham, the defensive end from Wake Forest, is a guy we definitely have to circle as well.
Yeah.
Clemson loses quite a handful of guys on the offensive line. So they are going to be, I don't want to say rebuilding, but kind of getting those guys, I guess, rejuvenated and back into that starting role. And Basham's not a guy that you can mess around with and kind of, do a trial and error, because you're going to have more errors for sure if you're going to go that route. So Basham's a guy that has a lot of upside as far as, athletic profile. Maybe not this, finesse type edge rusher, but still he's very technical, and his pass rush plan has a lot of solid upper body moves and kind of has that refined pass rushing plan as well. So it's a guy that's also very strong against the run. So I think he's a guy that we definitely need to circle when we're just talking about matchups in the trenches.
Carlos Basham was one of those guys I watched in the summer with former Canadian Football League defensive end and former Michigan defensive end Craig Rowe. It was awesome to have him join me on the show over on the Cover One YouTube page. And we watched Carlos Basham and we watched Kwity Paye out of Michigan. And I think we both agreed that we actually both liked Kwity Paye quite a bit, just because of what you kind of saw some of the potential there. Not saying we disliked Carlos Basham, but we both thought that 2 areas he could improve on was his overall pass rush moves, his kind of a plan of attack, and then just at the point of attack, he wasn't very consistent there, but he has a ton of potential. And this could be kind of that game that he really says, hey, I am legit. Those 11 sacks that I had last year were not a fluke. And he's one of those guys for sure. I think if he can get the plethora of pass rush moves in his arsenal, I think we could definitely be talking more about him. I know some people have him as a top 10, top 15 player already on their draft boards going into this season. I'm not that high on him, but I do like him, and I'm glad you brought him up. But I mean, it's a great week 1, or I guess you could say week 2 of college football, but it's really, now you've got the Oklahomas of the world playing, you've got Texas playing, you've got Clemson, Wake Forest, all those things. So those are really the big games. Those are some of the big names on the agenda for today. I'm excited to watch it. Can't wait. Another 30 minutes to go. But let's jump into the big news in the NFL. Obviously, as we turn away from the 2021 NFL draft, the 2020 college football season, we look kind of back at some of the rookies for the 2020 NFL draft. And the big news today, this morning, Isaiah Wilson, the 29th overall pick for the Tennessee Titans, offensive tackle out of Georgia, gets popped with a DUI, has not had a very good offseason to start his NFL career. You're the Titans fan. I'm going to give you the floor here. I'm sure you're going to be angry. I'm sure you're going to be a little pissed off, and I don't blame you, because some of the talent that was taken after him would definitely, I think, do the Titans some good right now. So the floor is yours, my man.
Yeah, it's tough because Isaiah Wilson, I was reading a lot of Titans beat reporters talking about, you could just kind of see the frustration on some of the coaches' face about, you wish you saw Wilson take that step forward. Of course, he's a rookie. He had some flaws coming out of Georgia. He wasn't this polished right tackle for Georgia. He was just that, smash mouth type runner type ability in that kind of system at Georgia. And he could kind of carry those same skill set, that same attribute over to Tennessee and what they like to do with running the football with Derrick Henry. But they just never, they being the writers and I assume the coaches, never saw Wilson taking that step forward in camp, which of course, Dennis Kelly was signed, I believe, to 3 years for Tennessee. So there was no expectation to necessarily Wilson to come in and start immediately, but you at least wanted to see some competition and at least potentially seeing him maybe start 1 or 2 games, maybe at the end of this season. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Now you slap on the DUI here, and now they have to evaluate what they want to do with them. And I know, sure, this happens every now and then with players, and, they face consequences, but they're still on the team. But, maybe with a guy struggling, I'm just not positive what plan of action they're going to take. So it's definitely more concerns for Isaiah Wilson than there is any really favorable potential, I'll put it that way, going forward for him with the Titans.
Yeah, and I mean, we do this every draft. I know I do. I always look at, when a team doesn't strike on a pick and it's like, oh, man, they didn't do well on that pick. Look at what's taken right behind them and all of that stuff. And you look at Isaiah Wilson at 29, and that was really kind of the big rumor going into the draft. They're going to take him at 29, but you look at some of the players behind him, Iggy out of Auburn, I'm sure you would have been thrilled with that. Jeff Gladney, I think we both would have said, hey, that would have been a great pick. You see Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, we all saw what he did Thursday night for the Chiefs. That would have been a nice little player to have in your back pocket in case something happens with Derrick Henry or you can't come to terms on a contract and all of those things. And, you've got T. Higgins there, Michael Pittman, Yetur Gross-Matos. I mean, that would have made sense just because they didn't have Jadeveon Clowney at that point in time, or as we were talking before the show, Marlon Davidson. That would have been a lot of fun to watch with Jeffrey Simmons. It makes you wonder, like, okay, can this guy turn it around? It's been a rough couple of months for him so far. And when you get really kind of those 2 strikes against you, can you recover? I think obviously any player can turn it around. And I'm sure this might be I'm hoping a reality check for him and a wake-up call saying, hey, just because you're in the NFL, you can't just live the life that you want to live any way you want. And if you do, well, you're going to be out of a job pretty fast. So I hope that happens for him, and I hope it turns around, because I want to see your team do well, and I never want to see a player do this to themselves in their career, but it's always unfortunate. So we'll see, but he's not the only rookie that we're paying attention to in week 1 of the NFL. Obviously, like I mentioned, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, big debut for the Kansas City Chiefs, 138 yards. We both agree. We love him. I think we both agreed that was a great fit, but we've got some other players we want to pay attention to. Go ahead with some of your names on your list for week 1.
Let's stick with the running back conversation here. And this all comes from Adrian Peterson being released by the Washington football team, and now he's a Detroit Lion. So I know you're tickled to death as far as that goes. But when Antonio Gibson, only 33 career rushes at Memphis, and now he could potentially maybe not be the starter week 1, but he's still going to get a plethora of touches in the receiving and rushing game. I'm not buying J.D. McKissick being RB1 for Washington going forward. I think he was kind of the same role at Arkansas State, and I think when he was used at Seattle, kind of that tweener between running back and wide receiver, not a true RB1 type player. And I know Peyton Barber comes over from Tampa Bay, so he may see the bulk of those true running back carries. But I'm just 100% interested in how they're going to utilize Antonio Gibson with his skill set. I don't know if he was necessarily drafted to be an RB1, but he's kind of going to be thrown into that situation with Washington facing off against Philadelphia, which is no team. I know their defense has some hiccups every now and then, but they're still strong up front and have a good all-around core. So it'll be definitely interesting to see the plan of action for Washington and what's at stake for Antonio Gibson at running back.
It's going to be a lot of fun to just see what happens with that Washington football team. I mean, Dwayne Haskins in year 2, Terry McLaurin in year 2. You throw in now Antonio Gibson, who former receiver, I thought was a better receiver than he was a running back, but obviously limited touches. Maybe it works out for them. Maybe he blows up and he has a great game against Philly, but staying in that game, I'm looking at Philly's first-round pick, Jalen Reagor. He's dealt with some injuries so far, but, Alshon Jeffrey, he's out. Deshaun Jackson, how healthy is he after, that surgery he had in the offseason? And then, you've got some unprovens there. Greg Ward, J-Jaw from Stanford. So what can they do there with the receiving group that they have? And then obviously, they have their tight ends in Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. But I think Jalen Reagor, it's a game. I don't want to say it's the must win, must prove himself type game for me, but like we mentioned with Isaiah Wilson, the players taken after him. Well, when I look at the receivers taken after Reagor, just off of my board, Justin Jefferson was right there. Brandon Ayuk was right there. T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, all right there. I would have taken those guys, but I get why they take Reagor, just simply because they're looking for that speedster, vertical threat, that guy that can not do it all, but you can really design an offensive game plan around him and make defenses prepare for specifically him. And it opens up so much of your passing game for other players and your run game for a young guy like Miles Sanders. So I totally get it there, but I'm really excited just to see what they do against Washington there. That's just going to be a fun game with some unproven rookies for sure. What's the next guy you got?
Yeah, I want to talk about Michael Pittman Jr. You just mentioned him in the slew of wide receivers. I mean, we talked about this 2020 being one of the best, maybe the best wide receiver group we've ever had in the NFL draft. And, of course, we're going to highlight a bunch of them here, and we have already. But Michael Pittman Jr. steps into the Indianapolis Colts depth chart, and even though he's listed as a second-string receiver right now, I think he's going to solidify himself as at least wide receiver 3 by the end of the year. I think he could even step up to wide receiver 2, given maybe, them not being 100% sold on Paris Campbell or Zach Pascal not being that consistent wide receiver 3 that they may want to see. So I really like the potential and just the opportunity Pittman Jr. has, especially going against Jacksonville this weekend. But Pittman Jr. 17.5% of his college receptions went for at least 25 yards. We saw that over and over again. If you just even watch his highlight tapes or just watch, a game from start to finish, he tests the deep parts of the field. He can be he's not a great route runner, but he's good enough that he can test the inside parts of the field. He can go deep, can really win a lot of those one-on-one battles. And I think would take a lot of stress off T.Y. Hilton having to win a lot of those physical contests on the outside. And we know Hilton's, bill of health in the past is not squeaky clean. So maybe Pittman can find more opportunities, maybe at the expense of Hilton having to miss some time, a percentage of snaps due to recovering from some injuries. So I think Pittman Jr., given, how if the Colts do assume the offense similar to how Phillip Rivers did with the Chargers, then you're going to see a high-volume passing offense. I know they just drafted Jonathan Taylor, so they're going to want to feature the run. They have a pretty good group of running backs there. But if they do air it out a little more, I see more opportunity for Pittman Jr. to really solidify himself as a top 3, if not a top 2 wide receiver in Indianapolis.
I love the fit for him. I thought it was a great landing spot. You throw in Jonathan Taylor as well. I like the way they're kind of revamping their offense, the way they've done in the past, revamping their offensive line. Some nice defensive players that they've drafted over the last few years. Now you throw in those 2 rookies, it's going to be a lot of fun. I got Jalen Johnson for the Bears. I think the defensive back out of Utah, he was my 25th overall player in the draft last year. I think it was a great spot for him. I think it was 50th overall. So for the Bears to get him where they got him, he's going to be not a number 1 corner, but a day 1 starter for them. I'm curious how he plays against the Detroit Lions this weekend. Matthew Stafford, first game back. They don't have Kenny Golladay. They do have Hawkinson. He doesn't really have to worry about Hawkinson too much, but he's in a defense with Eddie Jackson, who we all know makes plays on the football all the time. You've got Kyle Fuller, who's done a really good job as a number 1 corner. And now you have Jalen Johnson. Khalil Mack, he's questionable. Robert Quinn, he's doubtful. So they don't really have the edge rushers that they want to have in this game. So how much pressure does that put on a rookie? But, what will he do against, whether it's Cephas out of Wisconsin, who will probably get some snaps. If Danny Amendola plays, what does he do against him, or Marvin Jones? So it's going to be interesting to see how he matches up against the Lions in week 1. But I think it's a little bit more favorable for him without Kenny Golladay in the lineup. So I'm excited to see what he does. I think he's a player that, I don't want to say defensive rookie of the year candidate, but I think he could have a strong rookie season for the Bears because I love his skill set. I love the ball skills that he has and just his knowledge of the game. High football IQ kid for the Bears. So I like that one as well. I know you got a couple of other receivers as well written down.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of Jalen Johnson. I think he put together some of my most favorite film of this past year's class, just playing with such physicality, but such, I guess, calm technical demeanor for Utah. So he was definitely a guy that caught my eye, and I'm super happy to see him maybe assume, a rookie of the year, be an all-rookie type player at Chicago there. Yeah, a couple more receivers I have. Justin Jefferson, just seeing what his role is going to be with Minnesota. They're facing off against the Packers this weekend. I just want to see, you have, I don't know how many targets or receptions left on the board from Stephon Diggs. Somebody has to take those. And you have to assume it's going to be the first-round pick with Justin Jefferson. Assuming he's healthy going into this weekend, definitely want to see what kind of role he plays. He's going to, consistently stretch the field, kind of like how he did at LSU. 18 touchdowns just last year, not in his career, but 18 touchdowns just in 2019 with Joe Burrow and that LSU offense. So if you see some high-volume receptions come his way, I definitely think that's going to be very strong for Minnesota. Maybe not necessarily in this weekend, but I think we'll get a glimpse of what his role is. And then quickly, another wide receiver. I know there's many we could talk about, but Chase Claypool, the Notre Dame rookie, rave reviews from camp at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, there was always that talk about, is he just a glorified tight end or receiver? Is he, a receiver playing tight end, this, that, and the other? Just go out there and catch the football and ball out, especially if you're in the red zone part of the field, because this guy, he has a big body frame. He has a tremendous catch radius. He has pretty solid speed. I can't remember this 40 at the top of my head, but I think it was in that 4.6 range, maybe even lower than that. So Chase Claypool, I know it's kind of a crowded wide receiver room up there in Pittsburgh, but after Juju, you got James Washington, Deontay Johnson. They like to air it out up there. And as we've seen in years under Mike Tomlin's reign and Ben Roethlisberger's time at quarterback, that third or fourth wide receiver, they're going to get you a lot of value, and they're going to end up possibly as that wide receiver 2 candidate. So maybe Chase Claypool, he just finds and sits in the weeds there for a little bit and then makes some big plays to step forward on that depth chart. But I think Claypool, maybe not necessarily in week 1, we may get a glimpse of what his role is going to be, but I think maybe come 50% of the season, we're really going to see a defined role for Claypool and definitely see him step up and make some big plays this year.
Chase Claypool, 4.42.
Good grief.
Blew up the combine. I remember that. I remember it was – he came up to run. Everybody was saying the tight end stuff, and then all of a sudden he comes out and he blows the doors off the place at 6'4", 238. Yeah, that was a fun topic. I mean, I think he would be a great tight end. Don't get me wrong, like an Evan Ingram type of player. But no, I think you make a valid point. He's in the right place for him because all it is just run, ball out. That's all he's got to do. He doesn't have to do anything fancy. He doesn't have to do the Van Jefferson route running and Terry McLaurin and juking guys out of their shoes or anything like that. He's just got to run vertical, run a post route, running in, whatever, to dig, whatever you want to do, just do that stuff. And the ball's going to find him, and he's going to box guys out, and he's going to have, I think, a presence down in the red zone. So, you've got James Washington on one side, you've got him now and obviously Juju as well. I think this is a really good pick. I really agree with you there. Just some of the other guys I've got, Jerry Jeudy on Monday night against Tennessee. I'm just curious to see what he does. I know Cortland Sutton's been battling through some injuries. You've got Jerry Jeudy. Could he see an expanded role on week 1 in his debut on Monday Night Football at 10 o'clock Eastern time? I'm super excited to see it. He wasn't my number 1 receiver, but he was my 6th or 7th best player in the draft this past year. So I love his skill set. Joe Burrow, Obviously, what can he do in his debut against the Chargers? He's going to have to, face a pretty tough pass rush. Obviously, you've got Joey Bosa, you've got Melvin Ingram there. So what can he do there? They don't have Derwin James, but I think he could have a decent week one if he can survive the pass rush. And then the big one that I'm waiting for the All-22 is Jedrick Wills, rookie debut for the Cleveland Browns at left tackle against the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens, they have Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe, and Brandon Williams. So all veterans that could take him to school, or Jedrick Wills could have a really great debut or maybe just a mediocre one. But either way, that's one of the games that I'm really paying attention to for Jedrick Wills.
Yeah, welcome to the NFL, Mr. Wills. I mean, that's a handful that you got to take care of. Yeah, one more guy that I'm going to circle real quick, and I know we can head out of here. But Isaiah Simmons, the Cardinals, I guess, inside linebacker, according to their depth chart right now. I know he's listed as a second-string guy, but definitely interested, of course, Mr. Versatile, to see where he's going to line up. One matchup I would love to see. I don't know if we're going to get it in this game, maybe the second time they battle in this season, but potentially getting a man-on-man, one-on-one matchup between Isaiah Simmons and George Kittle. We know how versatile and how good of a route runner George Kittle can be, along with after the catch, just seeing him battle off the line of scrimmage. I would love to see at some point, we'll get at some point in their careers because they play in the same division, but to see Isaiah Simmons and George Kittle go at it one-on-one, I think that would be a match made in heaven and some film we would definitely come back to over and over again.
No doubt. I can't wait to watch the Cardinals. I'm going to be honest. Hopkins with Kyler Murray, Kenyon Drake, you throw in Isaiah Simmons to the defense. I mean, I think that could be a team that really is a sleeper this year, just with how talented they are offensively and obviously the talent on defense as well. So I'm super excited to watch them. But yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be a fun week one in the NFL, a fun essential week one in the college football. It's all getting started in about 20, 25 minutes. This will be up obviously in time. You guys, of course, can find us on iTunes, the Cover One Draft Podcast. Find it on iTunes. You can find it on Spreaker, Spotify, any major platform that you listen to your podcast, you can find us there. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And then, of course, find us on Twitter at RussNFLDraft, @_Christian Page. So, CP, enjoy the house, enjoy the football that we have on agenda today and tomorrow. I'm super excited. I appreciate you joining me, my man.
Absolutely. Football is back.
Yes, sir. We can't wait. So you guys, of course, like I said, rate, review, subscribe. Until next week, this is Cover One, the Draft Podcast.